Oh my god. We're actually doing it. It's actually happening. My mic sounds good. How does your mic sound?
My mic sounds great. I
Your
think
mic
we're
sounds
ready.
great. We tested it. Everything was tested. Okay, great. Yeah, well, this is Crystallization Culture. It's mine and Mandy's collaborative project where
Hi,
we're trying
everybody.
to.
Welcome.
Everybody's welcome. Mm. Yeah, we're trying to make everything perfectly crystalline, which means like super enlightened across the whole world.
Bold.
I was thinking that we could start with some intros. Uh, so I'm enlightened being Hanjo Yotaku. Uh, I teach people enlightenment, but I also have lots of magical energy powers. I can mantis from Guardians of the Galaxy too. It's kind of like that, but I don't have to touch people, so I can like fill other people's energy bodies and manipulate them, and then I do that for people to help them for lots of money. What about you, Amanda?
Mhm. Um, I am very cosmically and energetically aware shaman and
Sure.
witch. I focus my practice primarily on timelines and navigating to heaven world lines and incepting people into their own initiation and opening them into their cosmic awareness and their own magical powers. I believe it's really important to help people empower into their own sovereignty, and that these are after. Okay, my background is actually in education and psychology, and after having spent a lot of time there, I now know that magic and spirituality are the only ways to heal yourself, to move forward, and to open into the world.
Hmm. And you do mentoring sessions with people? What's that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I do mentoring sessions with shamans who are just coming online. There was a question in the chat, like, what is shamanism? And shamanism is a primal connection with the universe. It is a primary technology for the human species, and shaman are those who are elected by the times, by the culture, by the moment, by their own soul's journey to show up on this earth and to provide healing, magic, wisdom, and presence. So I help people who have crazy stuff starting to happen in their meditations, who have had spirit encounters but don't know what to make of it, and to really realize that they can step into this power and become co-authors with the divine for their own best life.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about timeline? Timeline? What's it like being a timeline person? What does that mean?
It's about potentiality and the quantum state and being able to apprehend the different possibilities that open to you from each choice. I believe that part of magic is becoming aware enough to operate in smaller and smaller units of time. So the more presence you bring to each unit of time, the more potentiality opens to you to be able to navigate it. This is, of course, like that's the most basic, present, constantly happening version of timeline magic, because the rest of it is like you can heal your past traumas, you can integrate your past lives, you can find pieces of yourself that are scattered across uh, all of history and space and integrate them with yourself into a more cohesive story, because all of time is extant, and we are choosing the pathways that we perceive. And so, therefore, it is possible to draw a pathway into yourself and grow it up inside your DNA.
Hmm. Yeah, my experience of timeline stuff is like I have a pretty acute sense of sort of the energy of a situation, and it's almost like the energy of the situation like is the situation. So I'm kind of sensing or discerning what's exactly going on. Um and that's kind of like an unnoticed thing. It's like the same as seeing. I'm just kind of sensing what's happening. And sometimes I'll like do an action, and then it's like I just feel like the whole all of the energy like shift, and I'm just like it's like, oh, that's like a timeline shift. I'm like in a different, like the dynamic trajectory of what I'm doing and where I'm going has changed dramatically, so that I'm doing something very different to what was happening before, or like the results are very different to what's happening before. And I feel that most primarily when I do manifestation magic. So maybe you could talk a bit about magic. I don't think you haven't mentioned that much about magic. I don't know. Mm.
Um, yeah, absolutely. So, with the manifestation magic, one of the things that I think is happening is we are simply like becoming the like you said, it's all present in the moment. So we are becoming the person who can exist in the other thing that is happening, right? So like therefore that future becomes open to us because we're the person who can exist inside of it or with it at the same time. Whereas before that shift, you weren't someone who could exist at the same time as that timeline. So magic's great. It's the reason, it's the whole universe. It's the reason that we're alive. It's the way everything works, and our capacity to recognize that gives us more granular access to how it actually functions. The way that I like to describe magic, because everyone's sort of a different practitioner and it's all about finding our own pathways of resonance. So, the way that I like to describe magic is that it's like playing a harp, and the harp has low octaves and it has high octaves and it has everything in the middle. And you can become someone who knows how to play all the octaves of the harp, or you can become someone who learns how to strike one octave really, really hard. And because of the rules of resonance, that will strike the same notes in the other octaves of the harp, allowing magic to move across this. So, an example of a low register action, or I don't mean low as a negative, I mean like embodied. That's what the low register means. It's an embodied action, is people who do key practice, right? So you're doing your Tai Chi or you're doing key dancing, and you are just connected with the primal force in your body. And when you thrum that really hard, the whole harp is like, oh, yes. And everything opens up for you. And you start having synchronicities and you start noticing magic and you start having more abundance and more access and more powers and more awareness, which is the key to all of this, right? Because the more awareness you get, the more becomes possible for you. Um, then we'll say the next octave is things like crystals, right? Where you're going to bring in a physical and energetic ally who is capable of helping you, and you're working on the resonance between the material and the energetic level to move meaning through this harp. The next level is sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic is using metaphors in order to drop meaning into the meaning field. Sympathetic magic, one of my favorite hoodoo spells is if you have a hard time with money, you put a lemon on a $20 bill overnight. And then the next day you pick
Mm.
up the lemon and you chuck it over your house. Now, the sourness of money has moved into the lemon and you are throwing it away from you. And
That's
this is a
cool.
very resonant spell. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the more you can do at this level, this is a great level for humans to operate. This is where witchcraft is because it's narrative. Narrative is how we move meaning across the densities and across the realms. It's how we talk to others. Like a spirit doesn't experience their reality the way that we experience it, but we tell stories that move us into this expansive energetic realm that tell across to their way of understanding, and they do the same thing back to us. And so it's able to move across this barrier and translate into everyone who's working together. Um, I, you do something like that, you add in a crystal, you throw in some body movements. Now we're really playing the harp across those things. And then the final level is the quantum, like really high pitched, teeny tiny string quantum level where you do almost nothing. You just drop a seed into reality and the whole of it shifts around you. And that's an incredibly powerful, incredibly available practice. But I also feel like it can be difficult for some practitioners, especially when they're first coming online. And then the other thing is that the other stuff is really fun. And I don't really see any reason to cut that out of my life in favor of like, oh, I just dropped it and it's done. Well, when I could like light some candles and breathe and meditate and sing a song and move it into prayer and all of these other things. And that's another piece, is that like once we start moving things out loud, it does things to the entire field. It does things to our human system. It moves across energy is all resonant waves. We could talk about it as light, or we could talk about it as sound. We can talk about it as the interaction amongst these things. But like when you bring sound into the equation, you're doing quite a lot. Seems like a good
Hmm.
primer. That's the introduction to magic, everyone.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, and I feel like like everything's magic is just what you said, but it's like so like any time that you're forming words in your head or your speech, you're creating meaning, and weaving it into the world. And there's different levels
That's
to that. Like, so
yeah.
if you're thinking it, and the Buddha talked about this as well. It's like in terms of the karmic effects of things. It's like if you just have a thought, an intention, and you hold it at the intention level, then you're not creating karma for yourself. So like if a monk looked at something and wanted to steal it, and then moved their hand like an inch, they messed up so bad. Like they would be removed from being a monk because they went to that level where they're manifesting the thing and they're creating the karma. So they're breaking the rules. And obviously, if they actually stole it, even worse. But like that's how the Buddha kind of saw like magic, right? Which is causes and conditions of reality. It's like anything which is beyond an intention is like a hard manifestation, and like thoughts and I don't know, just sort of intending things. It's sort of a soft manifestation. So if you wanna bring it down to the most practical level, it's like moving your body to like pick up an apple is manifesting picking up the apple. But there's a whole bunch of other things that can go into manifesting other stuff by sort of weaving meaning in a particular way. So there's kind of like there's like skillful magic, and this is kind of from Daniel Ingham's book, Mastering the Quotation, but I'm stealing this. It's like skillful magic, where you're sort of intentionally trying to like produce something, ideally something like morally good. And then there's unskillful magic, which is sort of all these unconscious patterns that are manifesting everyone's realities all the time. And it's kind of like and that's because it's a movement of meaning, right? So everyone's, I mean, this is simplification, but it's like everyone's always talking and like creating their realities, and then that creates like the reality of the earth that we're all on, which is kind of our cultural meaning field. And if everyone in the whole world started talking about better stuff, would live better lives, is the basic.
Right. Well, that's the big thing, is I don't believe that most people recognize the degree to which they're hexing their capacity to move into highest good timelines. They are so busy noticing, creating, and recreating their own experience of dissatisfaction that they aren't empowered to co-create, like you're saying, a better culture that could be for the whole earth.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most powerful practices that I did to like move forward with my life in a meaningful way, the first most powerful like magical spell was like I spent so long being like depressed and thinking, like, why do anything? Well, why do this? Because it's all meaningless, right? And I had a lot of reason to believe like there wasn't really a reason to do anything. And then one day I was like, wait, why not do this? It's like there's no reason like not to do it either. And like that meaning shift, right, shifted me into a whole timeline where now I was able to pursue like whatever I wanted, because I could just say like, why not do that? And I was like, why not get enlightened? And then like 6 months later, had a big experience. So, yeah.
Very powerful.
Yeah, so it's like oh, and the quantum thing. So quantum, like, it sounds like buzzwordy, but by quantum, I think what I know as quantum is like, if you observe something, it's different. And that's very fundamental to a lot of meditation practices, actually, because 99.999% of meditation practices that actually do anything, it's about making unconscious habits conscious. So you've got an unconscious pattern, an unconscious way of producing reality, like and then the way you're operating, you're not even aware of how you're operating. It's like your movements aren't conscious, right? And it's like a sequence of unconscious events. So it's like you think one thing, which leads you to like this thought loop, which leads you to this thought loop. Then you feel something in your body which is like painful, and you avoid it with this thought loop, and that's kind of just how you're creating your reality. And then like the meditation, right, like noting, for example, is like, let me just observe what's going on, quantum, and then by observing it, that pattern becomes conscious, and then you gain control and awareness of it.
Yes. This is a huge part of the like soul recovery and past life process, is because you have all of this stuff that is in the energetic field of your extended being that hasn't been fully witnessed or apprehended or could be seen. Like you are the aperture, right? So like in quantum physics, it's the aperture is the thing that observes. So like if you're the aperture in a scenario, you can move the placement of the aperture so that you apprehend a different experience. And this is available to you across like everything in the imaginal realm. So you're choosing to become the observer for, and I think of this as harvesting timelines. I think that this is the universe is in the business of harvesting up these timelines into itself. That's part of its perfection process. That's how the universe enlightens itself. Um, and when you do that, it is like a real shift down into your cells, which have quantum functions, and all of this is like seen across science. And it's really uh it's a somewhat fraught place to be in, right? Because like you said, it has become a buzzword, and it's become a buzzword for defensive reasons because I think people recognize how correct it is and are trying to bounce it out.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's actually the case for a lot of like so normal culture, as well as being like a field of meaning being produced by everyone on Earth at all times with their thoughts and actions, um, is also somewhat uh mm, being resistant on to change on like a wide scale level. And so anything that's like threatening to its continued existence as a as the way it is, right? Anything that makes it less permanent, um, which everything that is like not produced with intention and embodied with suffering has, right? This desire for like, no, I want like the good things to stay the same, and I don't want to change. Like resistant to change. It's like stuff like quantum physics, right? There's lots of great scientists doing work in that are just like ridiculed, or maybe getting less ridiculed now. But it's fringe science is quantum physics, even though a lot of our universe is pretty unexplained, actually. But even that, it's like crystals. It's like you just see like there's so many narratives in the normal reality, which like denigrate crystals, where it's like, oh, lots of like sexist narratives, stuff like that, where it's like, oh, crystals, ha ha ha,
And yet,
mm,
when we look at it scientifically, there's a couple of things, like there's many things going on with crystals, but like my favorite that breaks that open is caffeine is a crystal that reacts with your body. Like the world is full of crystals that we are in interaction with in a way that we can study. And then there's the energetic level, which we merely don't have the capacity to study using the tools that people are working with right now in what we think of as science, which is really just like materialism trying to keep a lid on things.
yeah, mm,
Oh, and then the other one is that the crystal formation thing where they form intelligent matrices. So the first time you synthesize a crystal on this planet, it's an incredibly difficult process where it's like its lattice doesn't know how to create itself. But as soon as one lab anywhere in the world does it, they start being easier to synthesize all over the world. Just lock right into place.
yeah. And I mean, I don't understand the skepticism around crystals, but I think once you really tune into what's going on in your body, you can start noticing these energetic phenomena that aren't easily explained by rational materialist views. And then when you pay attention to those phenomena in your body and start playing around with crystals, you notice things happen, which is just my
It's
experience.
absolutely yeah. No, it's absolutely undeniable at that level. I agree. I was sitting with a friend who has deep body awareness who was like, I want you to crystal pill me, and I was just like, just hold these and tune in. And like the first one was in his hand, and he was like mind blown, and because it's undeniable when you have that level of sensitivity.
Yeah. Um. So I want to talk about this idea of like gradual versus sudden. At least in like spiritual circles. I mean, it's really popular back in the day. I don't know how popular it is now, but there's sort of one school of thought uh where there's like these great sages of India, and they're like, uh, there's only one thing, and then it's like you get enlightened, and that's it. Uh, and like that is like the ultimate transformation, where you're just completely shifted into you're no longer affected by culture, like everything's impermanent, so you're just like there's just like the frames of reality happening. There's absolutely no sense of self, and it's like and I mean Yuji Krishnamurti even says that thing's acausal, so it's like it happened in spite of everything that he did. And it's just like his theory is that it's just like nature just like select someone to just be like this flowering existence of humanity, which is like the peak of humanity's form, just for that moment. And it's like they're perfectly attuned to be sort of the carrier of spirituality in that moment for humanity. And then that's all they're useful for. And then there's sort of the gradual school of thought where it's like, you know, everything you did before enlightenment mattered. Yeah, and the reason I think it'd be interesting because generally, our dynamic is kind of like frame breaker BF, frame creator GF. So it's like you're able to create these sort of beautiful containers that people can sort of flourish in, that are like useful meaning frames to orient themselves to better things. And my thing kind of is like destroying any possible frame, because when you destroy the frames, like that's when you get the insight. So maybe we could talk about the frame breaker frame creator dynamic actually instead of the sudden versus gradual, which is kind of a better framing I think for the whole thing.
Sure. Although I do want to say one thing on the sudden versus gradual / enlightenment thing is we've talked a little bit about it, and you can attain no matter what kind of person you are.
True.
And that actually, especially well, maybe all of history, but in this moment, feels like a very dangerous thing to attain without being a good person. Means that you have like a flawless visual capacity to participate in dominator systems that allow you to like bend the earth to your will if you want to, right? Well, or to have the earth's will, and like it's just thrumming with everything that's happening, right? But there are a lot of things that are happening that being selective about thrumming with, or recognizing that you don't move in that direction as a good person, is really helpful. So I just sort of wanted to like, I don't know, just like bring attention to that idea, because
Yeah,
then
I
it
mean,
makes like the healing that you did before really valuable, and the
oh right.
yeah, because then if you do realize enlightenment, then you're able to be a benefit for all being when you do.
Yeah, and I mean, the Buddha knew all about this. So like the idea kind of for me is that like you know, there's attainment of wisdom, and attainment of wisdom is just seeing how reality actually is. And what that means is you're basically synchronized in the present moment, so that there's no separate observer when you're in the present moment. And it's just like when you're saying things, the words are just coming out and there's nothing extra added on. And the same with everything that's happening. There's never anything extra added on. And there's never any desire for anything to be different or separate from what's happening. And you can do that even if you're really, really fucked up. And then there's compassion, which is like, you know, having goodwill towards all beings, finding joy in your successes and any being's success, wishing success and greater success for others, and having compassion for people who are suffering, and having equanimity about that whole thing, so you're not getting attached and engaged. And kind of the wisdom helps with the equanimity. But the compassion is really important too. And then there's a point, at least for me, where there's like there can be this fusion of kind of like the in my framing it'd be like the third eye and the heart. The third eye is like the control center that sees everything, right? Third eye, you're seeing discerning everything as it is. And then the heart's like this interconnectedness thing where you're able to be fully connected to everything that's happening. And it's like with that comes a very natural empathy, which isn't based in thought at all, where like something's happening to someone else and you're in it with them. And yeah, I agree. Like definitely you can like build wisdom, and not have compassion. And that's kind of like the choice that you have with spirituality. You can be, someone who is getting really, really wise and like developing themselves a lot and like really focused on improving their own self and sort of dominating other people and controlling other people. Or you can be someone who's looking to help all beings, benefit all beings. And you see that kind of dynamic where it's like being someone who's looking for their own personal gain and being someone who's looking for the gain of all beings. That kind of dynamic's like everywhere in reality.
Yeah,
But I like a lot about what you said with the gradual thing. So you're saying that like gradual practices like shamanic practices like soul recovery where you're going back to past memories and you're like working through trauma will like help you with not being someone who is terrible.
Yes. They till the soil so that I mean that's exactly what it is that it is preparing a space so that when you are just the space, everything about it is beautiful.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the Buddha, like most of what the Buddha taught was metta meditation, which is like all just heart practices for benefiting all beings. And it's like, this like moves to something that we kind of want to bring up. It's like, in the Buddha's world, like the amount of sutras where he's just like teaching God stuff, and it's like written just as matter of factly as like, he picked up a leaf. The invisible God said hello. He taught them this thing. So it's like, metta not only serves as a way to build compassion and to balance out your wisdom and equanimity, but is also the best practice for interfacing with any non-human entities that you might want to interface with.
Yes, absolutely. That's confirmed by my experience. If you move into it and through it with love, you will only be in contact with like benefit of all entities who want to help you and who have known you through many lifetimes and are just waiting for your permission to aid you.
Yeah, and moving through it with love, it's like you can do that formally, which means like any time that you sense that there's a non-human entity like a deva or god or an extraterrestrial contacting you, you can challenge them 3 times in terms of your highest personal principle. And it's kind of the idea of like highest and best, where you're like, for me, if anything comes into my experience, first of all, it has to identify itself by name, and then it has to repeat back to me 3 times. I say, like, do you come in and for the highest and greatest benefit for all and every being? And then it repeats it back, like, I am blah. I come in and for the highest and greatest benefit for all and every being. If it can't do that 3 times, I don't want that thing in my experience, because it's not, we're not aligned in our goals in the world. And that's okay, right? There's lots of, just like there's lots of different people who have different, visions for how they want to proceed through the universe. Some people want to proceed through like control and power and dominating people with that power. Some people want to move through in sort of like a resonant kind of beautiful way. The resonant beautiful people, those are the people that I'm looking for on every scale of being. Be it be gods that I want to talk to or people that I want to talk to. And you mentioned like moving through love, so it's like just sort of having that internal commitment to benefit all beings and to be holding that sort of meta just as sort of baseline of like, you're not going to be envious towards people, you're going to wish them success. So it's like your friend gets a promotion, you wish him success just sort of naturally. That's what it means to like move with love. And it's like you're someone is like doing something that might be upsetting or difficult for you to deal with. You're sending them goodwill. You still have goodwill to them, even though that's the case. And someone's having a bad time, and you're not ignoring it. You have compassion for them. So it's like maintaining those things in your day to day, combined with these formal practices of just like, I'm really gonna make sure that you're aligned with me on this one. It's pretty easy to stay safe, I feel, in that space, as long as you don't slip up.
So before we go into wherever that's leading, because that seems to be going somewhere really interesting, a part that I wanted to bring for how I extend compassion, especially in scenarios when it's difficult, is so incarnate in 3D on Earth, there's the understanding that we make pre-birth agreements with people who like also exist outside of space time in those moments, and we say, okay, we're going to get together, and when we meet together on Earth, we're going to be this thing for each other so that our souls can have this dynamic learning experience. And sometimes the things that we agree to be to each other are really violent or really awful or really scary, but it's so that the universe can learn. And understanding that that's not just happening on the level of human incarnate, but that's what's going on at every level of the universe, is that it has agreed to split into itself, to do things to itself, so that it can have learning experiences with ourselves. So then when you meet something that is like a horrible evil entity that is trying to take over your reality, you can still love it. You have to love it into oblivion, but you can love it into the oblivion of knowing that it's just doing its role, because everything is doing exactly what it's meant to do
Hmm.
and has agreed to.
Yeah, and it's like I have gratitude, but for you and me, it's better we don't perceive or sense each other. Is kind of the move with
Yes.
like any entity that was given to you for a negative learning experience.
Yes.
um, yeah, and it's like it's kind of annoying actually for me at least because I had a big realization about how uh like reality works and how it's like everything's the present moment. It's kind of my experience where it's like there's not really anything other than what's immediately happening. It's like if I really tune into it, there's just sort of vibrations existing, even though apparently I'm saying words, but I have to look at it like I'm saying words to notice that. Um, and I was like, how do I explain this to people? Was my first instinct. Bodhisattva. Um, and I was like, everything happens for a reason, was what came into my head, and I was like, oh, that's kind of true. Actually, it's really hard to articulate, but it's like each thing that's happening is there exactly because it was placed there with like the intention of the universe for a particular thing, and the more that you can synchronize with that reality, the less you have to be like a person that's holding themselves in a body, and the more you can just be whatever's happening.
I think understanding like the timeline stuff and all of time as extant is really helpful there, because again, if there was anything else for you to perceive, you would be perceiving it. If the right, like you could be the you who is in another parallel timeline doing something completely different in that moment, but you're not. And for me, that's like a big piece of everything that I need in order to be absolutely okay with everywhere I am.
Hmm. So you're knowing that there's parallel timelines where there are other possibilities, and you're knowing I'm in this possibility, and uh,
And that's my like kind of my job right now, is to be in this possibility.
hmm. How do you I think I have a grasp of it, but how do you so let's say you're in this possibility, and then you're like uh you want to do some magic to change timelines or something. It's like, what's the conceptual reckoning there? And I have an answer for this, but I'd be interested to hear. Hmm.
Across like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Well, this is as much as I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, it's also all already existing, which means that I am just choosing where to position the apparatus in order to navigate through all of these world lines. One of my favorite examples of this is that I actually believe that every single incarnation has a timeline where it's the one that awakens for your soul, at like becomes enlightened. And so what we're really doing with enlightenment is deciding whether or not we get to be the one of us this time who perceives it. And I really like, I
That's
really
beautiful.
resonate with that way of doing things. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think when it comes to enlightenment as well, I just want to kind of be clear about what I mean by it. Like the synchronization with the present moment is the synchronization with the present moment of whatever's happening for your particular incarnation at this particular time, which is an infinite possibility space, but it's contained by your conditioning. There's kind of like a Zen thing where it's like when you get enlightened, you're just playing out whatever karma you have left. Um, and I have reason to believe through interfacing with various godlike entities that continues even when you sort of go to these heavenly realms and things like that. You're still just like an enlightened being that's playing out their karma, but you're doing it now like as a deva or as a god. When you do sort of go to that higher place. And the reason I was kind of bringing this up is because inherent in the idea of enlightenment is kind of this thing that usually Krishnamurti was saying, where it's like there's this like beautiful flower that's totally unique, is the most important part of that, and perfect for the time. So it's like no enlightened person is the same, because the whole point is that they're a perfect you synchronized they're perfectly synchronized with their personal uniqueness and individuation, and are like the most themselves that they can be, is actually what it is. And you can't do that conceptually. You have to do that through destroying everything that isn't you, which is like, who am I? Meditation.
So this brought up for me, and it ties back into something we were talking about earlier, because you were talking about it was back when we were talking about how the culture can be resistant to receiving information. And it's just sort of like noticing this ego structure exists across, like, whether you're human or you're a history or you're a place or you're an egregore or you're an unenlightened god, the you can find that ego structure, or you're an ancestor who doesn't have attainment, like you can find that ego structure there, and when you find it, you have to be wary because it is preventing the perfect expression of the flower.
And just to be mind clear, like from my and Amanda's viewpoints, it's like meaning structures are what beings are. Like we're meaning structures, and so are like places. And yeah, we can't like super easy, like they're not just like the wall isn't opening up into a mouth and being like, hi, I'm New York City and this is my viewpoint. But if you look at it from like an energetic place, and you're able to do this shamanistic thing, it's called the journeying, where you're tuning into the sort of meaning of things and communicating with them through meaning, then like places become just like beings. Hmm. Hmm. I muted my mic because my dog's woofing.
Which pupper?
Um, perhaps you could talk about something while I go sort it out. I was thinking about the, because you're kind of the place being expert. It's like like yeah, you spend some time communing with a city, like with shamanistic practices. So maybe you could talk about how shamanism works in that context while I go talk to my woofer. I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. So what I think is important to understand here is that everything is nested place minds that fit inside of each other. So understanding yourself as a sensitized place mind that is in intrachange with your environment, where you can dial into every
Oh.
piece of the expression of your body as telling you something about the way that your body is formed, and the way that your body experiences itself, and the way that your body expresses itself. Now you have sort of a key to moving across into another entity's way of experiencing their self, because what you're going to do is you're going to look for their body as a transcorporeal instead of as a solo contained entity. So the body of a city, like the emotional body of a city, is the tenor and movement of the people inside of it. And you can start to feel this long history, and you can start to feel the way people carry what it conveys and amplify what it conveys, because it's this righteous co-creation cycle. You can start to feel where there are pathways that are like, this is what the shadow of a city is it's a pathway begging to be embodied. There's something that the place needs, and it's telling you it through the way it expresses its pain, suffering, darkness, uh degradation, loss. Inside of that is this perfect piece of information about the way that it's hurting, and the capacity to notice that we could change the way that we, as the enrollers inside this transcorporeal body, as cells inside this larger body, could help aid its health by flowing through these pathways that are just begging to be filled.
Mm, that's beautiful. Uh,
Thank you.
mm, yeah, it's interesting because on some level, it makes me feel like to be like that perfect cell. Um, it would be like getting enlightened personally, right? Becoming the perfect version of yourself, so you're just perfectly in sync with your conditioning. But uh, I'm guessing actually it would be doing that and also wanting to benefit others at the same time.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But it is worth noticing that like being able to be in, and this is a little bit of a gradual sudden thing, is that there is a level where being in your biggest available emotional resonance can still create like righteous cycles where other people are partnering into the flow, and where things are more capable of healing. And again, this is a place where we can go really deep into our own healing, because when you're with a place, its suffering transfers across into your body and it resonates. It can't resonate if there's not a wound there for you. So you won't notice something about it that isn't about you. And you're there specifically because you can notice that wound, and that healing it in yourself will have the magnifying aggregate effect on the whole, where it starts to heal it in the location as well.
It's the same thing actually with all energy. Um you're only able to, for me at least, like when I'm tuning into someone else's energy body and I'm feeling it in my body, um the places that I'm feeling are because we have resonance with what's happening. We're both connected to the same thing on some level, and that's really what I'm tuning into. Is like what parts are we both connected to, and then how can we work together to heal those parts? Is kind of like the move. Um,
Beautiful.
yeah, uh, and I think that also that kind of applies to like all interactions. It's like you're always working, if you're working with resonance, right? Resonance really is connection, like a connection where um you're both connected to the same thing, uh and by observing that same thing together, energy is created. So it's like you're both connected and observing the connection, like that's a good connection because it's creating energy for both of you. And that can be seen like for everyone on all levels. It's like if you're talking to someone and you're both into the same subject, you're both connected to the same thing, and you're both having this sort of like it just feels really good to be able to talk about it. Especially like with like maybe traumas that feel really good to be seen and talked about with other people. Um, then there's this huge like release of energy, and like it's like there's a bunch of stuff that's been freed up, and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Where it's just like observing mutually resonant connections creates energy. And then there's the flip side of that, right, where it's like if you're connecting with someone, um and it can then it and you're seeing that you're both connected to it, this can be kind of like a reinforcing of that thing, where you're like both kind of losing energy. And I think actually a part of that is not observing it. Mhm. So the quantum thing's
So it
linked. Yeah.
it absolutely is linked. So this actually made me think of, there's a parallel in journeying, because when you do group journeys, you receive medicine from the same source, but you don't have the same experiences, and you don't necessarily tap, like your awareness isn't with the same aspects of the medicine. And so one thing that we can think of it is that every medicine that you're able to receive is a pattern signature, or like a crystalline projection pattern signal. And so let's say you're doing like a bat journey, and bat has all these different things about it that are true, like it is the night creature, it is the rebirth creature, it's the initiator creature. You're only going to resonate with the parts that are in you and ready to be activated. And it's like then you go like face to face with the facet of the crystal. And when you're doing group journey, people are face to face with different facets inside their experience. And so someone might get like, actually, Bat is an amazing mother, and I had no idea, and this was so important to me, and it was so healing, and it was super important. And someone else is like, I died and was reborn as the cosmic Bat. And both of those are Bat medicine, and it's about where the resonance is right in that precise moment.
Mhm. And yeah, just to be I guess for me, like journeying is that you're basically it's like an imaginal thing that's co-created by spirits or like gods, where they're giving you an experience that you wouldn't normally be able to experience. For example, like being a bat or like being a snake, and then like being a cosmic bat or being like a cosmic snake, and then that's like it's really really powerful because of this like meaning resonance, right? So it's like you become a snake. At least for me, it's like I become like a snake, become like a snake god, and then feel what it's like to be with a snake body, literally experiencing it as being a snake, like what it's like to be connected to enlightenment and like the god of the universe, like the universe itself, right? Um, and it's like just having that, it's like being given a whole new perspective, like living another life, basically.
Yes. What I love so much about journeying is that it allows you to slide across different types of experiencing and perspective and integrate them into your own. So once you've done it, you're like, oh, bat is me now. Snake is me now. And have it like, maybe there might be a layer where there are pieces that feel more resonant and pieces that feel like more like I just learned this thing inside of me. But it's how we become not it's my method, my favorite method for becoming non-separate with things.
Hmm. Like journeying and then like making that just like a part of you. Hmm.
Well, it always becomes a part of me. That's part of my journeying experience, is like the medicine that I receive is part of the signature blueprint of that entity. And now I like, and this is part of what I do with my like nature witchery and shamanism too, is like I have experienced storm, so I know what storm is. I have experienced Earth's magnetic field. I know what that is to be that, and therefore know what it is to be the sun, and then the solar system, because it all like um and when you have that knowing, it changes anything that's contained inside the smaller perspective so that it is a different entity.
Hmm. And so are you like able to embody this, like the storm, for example, or just in your day to day, or is it more like there's kind of like a co-creation where it's like it's less like you're able to embody the storm, maybe it's more subtle?
So for me, honestly, I think that there's a interesting dynamic here, because for me it tends to be like really intense empathy, like I'm with the tree, a storm is happening, I'm with the storm. Um Empathy for other beings. And then, but there is like, this is aligned with a lot of tantric practices, it's aligned with a lot of shamanistic practices, as you can evoke and invoke the thing inside yourself, and then you can use its modality to get to be more effective in your life, to bring the energy that you need in that moment. So if you've got something that's like, storm is really a great energy because maybe you have something that needs to change in your life, right? And you haven't been able to manifest inside yourself the integrity to change it regardless. And so if you can call storm into yourself, now you are a force of nature, and you can move through that with that integrity inside of you. Now, for some people that might be a dangerous practice because they don't have the compassion secured, to like, they could become a rageful storm and just be like really wretched. Um which is again why I think the healing part of things is so important, is because then we these become mantles, and we can wear these mantles, and we start to know uh again the lines of compassion, how to use these mantles in a way that benefits all beings, how to use these mantles in a way that is resonant and will create more thriving.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think I mean in regards to like the healing, um the kind of thing that I say to people is you do as much healing necessary so that you're able to function sanely and like well in the world. Uh and like if you have that secured, like focus the rest of the time on getting enlightened, because that's actually the best thing. Is like
Hmm.
because like
I don't
Any
know if sanely and
hmm,
well in the world, I'd like to just like
hmm,
define those a little bit because it's so easy to think that sane and well in the world actually means like uh going to your job and doing exactly what you like imposed on yourself is what you should supposed to do, but I think that that's actually a manifestation of insanity. And so like sane here means like with awareness in a way that feels wholesome inside yourself and in a way that is resonant with the people who are resonant in your life and doesn't cause you undue hardship.
hmm. Having a good time. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
sure.
yeah, and then because once you actually get uh enlightened, I mean, even in the lower stages, like there's like everything that is not seeing things as they are, not being synchronized with the present moment, acts as a kind of weight of dukkha or like difficulty living. It's like this for me. It was like this edginess to experience where it's almost like you're hungover. Right when you're hungover, it's like every movement kind of hurts, and you don't like whenever you do anything, there's an associated pain. It's kind of like that, but all the time, but you're not noticing it. So if you can like shed those layers first and primarily, then everything becomes easier. And like looking at it from like, yeah, I play a lot of video games. It's like if it's a video game, like you want to get the thing that makes everything better first before you start working on the other stuff. But then there's like the reality of like, hey, you're in the world and like you're connected to other beings, and you also have to be heartful and like uh have goodwill and have joy. Um because if you don't, it's like why are you doing it in the first place? My friend was like that's kind of his whole thing. It's like he's a family guy, great guy. And it's like if your practice like isn't connecting you more with your family and making you happier and like bringing you joy and like making it easier to be with them in like a heartful way, it's like why are you practicing? I think that's great. It's like there's a very easy barometer for how you should be like what's if your spirituality is going well, and it's like how much joy is in your life. And yeah, you can just like gun the wisdom, and it's great to get that out the way. Um but it's like there should definitely be like these big like beautiful moving moments where your life is just way better within that. And if there isn't, it's like, what are we doing here? Uh,
Yeah. That's It's very aligned with my own experience where I was developing, I was working with enchantment and I was developing an awful lot of wisdom and insight and creating frameworks and all of these other things, but I didn't fully realize how depressed my system was inside it. So my practice was not actually working for me. And now I've moved into this space where like it's so easy to be present and it's so easy to be creative and it's so easy to uh see all of the ways in which my practice is benefiting me instead of being like, oh, in the future this is going to be so great, which is a red flag you should always
it's a
notice.
red flag. Should be like if not immediate, then like pretty immediate. Uh, yeah. And that's kind of like what I noticed with teachers. At least for me, it's like I went to a retreat recently with enlightened teacher, which I won't shame by saying the name, but it's don't really like that kind of thing. But yeah, like fully enlightened teacher, and it's like every single moment of interaction was so heartful and joyous, and it's like he's just having a great time all the time, and like that's kind of like that's what you want to look for in a teacher, because like they just have the heartful presence for you to be involved without causing more difficulties. You know, you can be the wisest person on earth, but you know, it can still be really difficult to be around you.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah,
a lot of people, a lot of really spiritual people, especially ones who have like star race connections or wanderers and that sort of thing, they actually have a lot of sadness and a lot of suffering and a lot of like, uh, I just can't wait to go home. And I like my heart uh fills with compassion for them. But we gotta learn how fun this game is. You gotta recognize how much liberation is available when you move that way. And when you let go of being attached to it being different, that all becomes possible to you.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of like you kind of plan the events in your life so that you can process through the suffering of them. Um,
Yeah.
and like that's actually like super intentional. And then that's how like gratitude practices can become. Not only they're not like a cope, they're not like you just saying like I'm really grateful for this shitty thing. It's like you're really seeing that like the suffering
Yeah.
is actually what you want and what is good for you, and you're actually grateful for it. And that can be a beautiful
Some
thing.
some of the worst experiences in my life are the things that like cracked me open to cosmic awareness. Like, yeah, were awakening events that left me with tons of wisdom and insight and new pathways forward that wouldn't have been available to me. And I had to do a lot of healing around them, but also I have so much gratitude now because it's amazing, because it was such a gift from the universe.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you don't know how good you got it till you know how bad it can be. Uh, is part of the whole thing. I feel like.
Yeah. I
Mm,
actually there's a methodology that I'm really fond of for like finding your like purpose here, and it is you look at all of the thing like you look at what the main signature of lack in your life has been. And what it is that you needed that signature of lack so that you could know, oh, I'm the one who's supposed to bring joy. And I know this because I never had joy. Oh, I'm the one who's supposed to bring, and I know what the absence of joy looks and feels like. And then when I get that tiny taste of joy, I recognize that this is like my entire purpose. And that can happen across all sorts of different ways of being, where it's like, it can just be a really helpful tool for honing in on like, what is the gift of this suffering that I've been through.
hmm. Mm, I like that. Yeah. Mm. I guess it would be kind of fun to talk about like practice. So for me, like, there's explicit practice, right? Where you're like, okay, I'm gonna basically you're creating an environment where it's easier to do the things that you want to do. And if you want to do like, if you want to get insight and you want to maybe even develop yourself and work through unconscious habits, it's best if you're focused internally, which means like sitting with your eyes closed, watching your thoughts or sensations in your body go by. It's pretty ideal conditions for figuring out how you operate and how the reality operates, because you're not getting distracted by like thoughts, feelings, some guy asking you to give them 20 pence. And you're like, yep, but I was trying to meditate. You should have been inside. But that's okay. And for me, ideal conditions are I quite like walking around as well. I try to just like walk in places where I'm not going to be talked to, and like just contemplate what's happening. And as well as that sort of like putting yourself in the ideal conditions, like there's also just the day to day thing where it's like every single day, um, you're you're practicing. Like everything you do is practice. Like everything you do is magic. Um, and you're keeping steady attention on the things that you want to get insight into or inquire into or find out about. For example, like you're keeping steady attention on your body sensations during the day, or you're just trying to like you're just really contemplating and it's really gripped you the question of like who am I and where's myself. And I feel like both of those uh, are important, but I personally feel the most important thing is to have that like no matter what situation you're in, you're inquiring into ideally into what reality is. Hmm.
Interesting. I My experience is a little bit different, but I think it's doing the same thing because as an animist, right? Uh it's like you're encountering it energetically first, and energy is people and like all of its entities all the way down, right? And I often just enter into it with like a who are you, right? So like that's actually my main focus on discerning reality in that moment is like Oh, I'm in a place. Who are you?
Mm.
Oh, I'm in an emotion. Who are you?
That's really, really cool and interesting, and I think actually points to the exact divide between like Buddhism and shamanism, where shamanism's like, who is this entity that I'm interfacing with, and like you're coming from the meaning, you're coming from the what things are, um, and Buddhism's like, what is this thing, and you're looking at the sensations and the play of phenomena in terms of the three characteristics of like nothing stable, uh like meaning isn't like actually reality, uh there's just this play of sensations where there's not, and it's all just arising by itself like in the present moment with no person there. um and I think I completely agree that those are two ways to the same thing.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that this is
Mm.
like the Tantra Vajrayana, or the Vajrayana, I know this word, the other one. The other one, the sitting and meditating Buddhism instead of the shaking up reality Buddhism.
I don't know any terms.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. That's all right. We don't need to know the term. The
Vipassana.
yes, yes.
Mm.
Thank you. Um, you did know the term. No, you
I
just
was lying.
drew it in.
I was lying. No, yeah, it's hard to remember things.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. That's an interesting thing. Everything's like a catalyst. Like this, there, it's not. It's super available when it's extra relevant, and then when it's not, it like trying to get a reference like I just was, it mattered less and it couldn't be there in that moment. And
That's
that's
really,
very
yeah. It's
much
like the, and it kind of relates to what we talked about, where it's like, so with meaning, it's like meaning, uh, is meaning, and then it's like people are meaning, but they're a denser form of meaning. There's like so much meaning all over the place. It's like the way that
mm-hmm.
your stomach processes food, that's meaning. It's like the whole system is these just layers and layers and layers of densified meaning, which means like, and then density is kind of how we can recognize something as like, oh, that's a being that I can communicate with, or like that's a thing that I can have a relationship with, or like, oh, that's just like a wispy meaning
A
thing.
wisp. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like and like place, it's like your home. Your home is clearly like layers and layers and layers of meaning all stacked into each other through like everything, like all of your objects that you're placing everywhere, all of your intentions that you're putting, what you're using different rooms for, and you can relate to it as a being, if you want to, in the same way you can relate to a person as a being. Um, and I think where I was going with this was like the density of meaning, uh, is part of like how you're orienting through meaning space through time. So it's like when
Yeah.
you're producing words in a sequence, you're like navigating meaning in like different densities of meaning, and it's like finding the exact term for something isn't super dense, so it's like harder to like find it at the time. Which
Yeah.
brings up an interesting actually, it's like how meaning changes over time, right? Because sometimes something feels really dense and like, whoa, this is so
Yeah.
meaningful, and sometimes it doesn't feel meaningful at all. It's like the subjective objective, there's some quantum thing there, I think.
Right. Whether or not it's in resonance, whether or not it's like the moment that you're supposed to be interacting with that, or you are because R is supposed to interacting with that meaning. Um, That's super interesting. What's coming up for me is Hofstadter's I'm a Strange Loop, where he talks about consciousness being the static that emerges from something looping on itself. And so you can have, like you were just talking about that little wisp of meaning where it hasn't aggregated on itself to form more density. And that's like maybe not even a complete loop, or it's one loop, or it's three loops. And then you have things like human consciousness, deity consciousness, spirit consciousness, and they have been looping and looping and looping and looping and looping, creating so much uniqueness and so much static and so much friction. And then you have like total oneness with the universe, which is the cessation of that friction into realization.
Mm. So it's like suffering's looping. It's like the idea. Mm.
Consciousness is looping.
But then
And
the
that looping is perhaps suffering.
oh, okay. Because that fits into like the like rebirth is like suffering, and then it's like when you stop suffering, you stop being reborn. In this, I guess, in this sort of like human place. Um, and what that means is right is like you've like learned everything there is to learn. You've got all of the meaning that there was to mean through like your going through existence, building
Yeah,
your
the
consciousness.
incarnative process.
Mm.
Yep.
Now it's like time to do something else. Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to dial in on that is related to what you were just talking about, as we were honing in on like shamanism and Buddhism both having pathways into this realization, is something we've talked about a little bit recently, and I've seen elsewhere. So I'm glad that it's propagating. Is that when the Buddha was talking about Buddhism, he was in a culture that is replete with spirit. Like everyone had household spirits. Every place had known deities who were worshipped. Every family had ancestors who were venerated. And that connected lineage is super massive and super present and super available to you, regardless of whether you're a monastic who sits in meditation, because that's not actually what it's for, or whether you are someone who is engaged in shamanic practices, or whether you're just, and not even a householder, whether you're just someone, right? Like it's part of your culture, it's so intrinsic to you. And then when we transport it to the current era and in the current context, you have a lot of people who have never had any sense of spirit contact, never had any sense of prayerful connection, never had any sense of meaningful embedment in a richer energetic world, being told that they're supposed to ignore that because Buddhism is like
Western Buddhism.
recognizing, yeah, Western. Well, I was gonna. There is what I was honing in on is that the recognition that all of it is fabricated, whether it's material or spirit, is only a balanced recognition when they were both equally real to you to begin with.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think yeah, part of realizing any realization is realizing this like the layers of being and like who and what you're connected to, and that's kind of like the hard thing as well. Again, where it's like, oh, it's like everything that I've done in my past lives, for example, or even everything that's happened in my family history across time, like it's all causally layered down to like this moment, and I am connected to it. And like the jump from knowing that you're connected to it kind of in an abstract way and like, oh, I'm connected to it and I can connect into it with like a journey or with like recovering memories or like actively trying to heal people in your family. Like that's sort of the leap from being like a like normal person to like a spiritual person, really.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah. Also want to say that that time experiencing isn't it's sequential, but it's not linear. So all of that doesn't have to be happening in like an ordinal. It so there's like dipping a future life in the past, a past life in the future, a and also the retrocausal stuff with ancestry. And again, this is like perceiving where you can like, and this is big manifestation stuff, is you can move into a timeline where things are different about what's true about your ancestors, and that is retrocausal from you healing things that are immediate and present in your field, that then extends reverse epigenetically up the ancestral DNA and energy.
Mm. So so being you like you heal something in yourself and then it's like you're talking to your parents and you're like, huh, they seem like that's kind of held them as well. And it's got
Yeah.
like and that's the connection thing again, right? Where it's like you're both connected to the same thing. You observe and are aware of and work through that same thing. Oh look, everyone connected to that now benefits. And that's kind of why like enlightenment is like the greatest benefit for the world, no matter how or when it happens. It's because it's so interconnected with everything, and everyone's connected to basically everyone's connected to culture. And what's happening is that culture is becoming aware of itself, and then
Yes.
it's healing
So
itself
this
through you becoming aware of it. in
Yeah,
yourself.
we're so used to the perspective where culture comes down into us and we become an expression of it, but it's actually an active interchange, especially at the energetic level, and especially when you're like fully in presence in your power, when you're enlightened. Now all of a sudden you've flipped the understanding of that rhizome, and we are in interchange, and we are creating more, and we are creating differently together.
Mm. Yeah, and like, and really this all does come down to, it's like the quantum thing where you're like observing it is being aware of it. By being aware of it, uh the reality shifts. And it's like, if you're able to be aware of like who you truly are, then like kaput, it's like the whole system's like out of your system now, because who you truly are, like, uh is just the sensations that are happening. And like that's what all these practices are trying to do. They're just trying to make you aware of things you weren't aware of before.
Yes. And awareness is huge, and awareness spreads through contact, and awareness is something that we can become aware of the ways in which we spread awareness. And in our hyper-connected world, it's like easier to see even than it probably was prior, where someone would, like a magician in a lab, would be working on something really hard, and he would publish a book that only 17 people were ever going to look at because nobody read and all of these other things. And it would still be changing the world through the cultural rhizome because of his intense connection with it, but he wouldn't be able to witness it the same way that we're capable of witnessing it now. And I think that that's really special, and like what an opportunity to uh because then our awareness increases, and it essentially becomes a righteous cycle of so much more being possible because of what we catalyze through each other, simply through bringing awareness to the fact that it is possible. Like that is probably my most righteous shared spiritual practice, is appointing awareness for each other.
Right? It's like, if everyone in the whole world became aware that they were able to direct their awareness uh to good things happening for the whole world, then it would be such a gigantic shift. And like, that's what you're doing when you're on your spiritual path, right? Is you're just becoming more aware of how you can become aware. Mm.
A lot of what I'm doing right now is spreading awareness of journeying and dismemberment practice specifically, uh, because there are just like there are a bunch of proto shamans just waiting to be catalyzed, and they only need to be catalyzed through awareness.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're watching this podcast right now in any form, then this has probably been your opportunity to become catalyzed into whatever the best thing that you want to be, through the freely available sessions to become a shaman with Mandy, or the free enlightenment sessions with me. I mean, mm, just saying. If you're like, oh wow, like, what if I could be one of those things? Uh, it's probably a
You
reason.
probably are. If you ask that question to yourself ever, it's because you already are.
You already are, and like, I'd be happy to make you aware of that.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing I feel like with it's like a good someone who's good at helping people with spirituality, and someone who's less good. The good people, it's like, you already are this thing, and like, I'm gonna help you notice that. And like, there's no judgment, right? There's no like, you should be different, right? There's only like them as they are, and like making them aware of what is for them. And then, yeah, bad would be like, follow these things, do what I say, like, be like me. um be like me, bad, bad, bad.
Yes. Be the most you can be, and here are some things about me that might help you realize it, is sort of a way that that moves, like when it's about sovereignty. And that's sort of the difference here too, right? Is spiritual teaching that is about sovereignty is bringing more of you home into you, and it's opening doors for you and helping you have realizations and raise awareness. Ones that aren't about sovereignty, it's about the thing that you're doing. It's about sort of indoctrination into that methodology. It's about that methodology becoming an egregore and it wrapping up your energy inside of it. And that's highly undesirable.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a big part of what I help people with energetically, is like, hey, like, you're connected with this thing, and that's not you. And just by observing that that's not you, and observing like that there is a thing that is you, and you can just be sovereign in that thing instead of being connected to things that aren't you, which aren't resonant. Like, and then that's like, oh, like you're maybe someone hurt you in the past, right? And like you're still connected to them through that hurt, and that's like actively affecting your consciousness. It's like really you just want your consciousness in your body ever, and like other people's consciousness in your body, bad for the body. You always want that separation, and to get that separation, you have the observation. So it's like as soon as you notice that there's a thing in your body, which is someone else, you're already doing a great thing. But when that's an unconscious thing where you're just losing energy all day and like you're feeling like all fucked up and you don't know why, and it's like it just doesn't really make sense in this rational materialist way, but it's because you're connected energetically to things which you're not aware of and they're kind of infiltrated into your consciousness. Very powerful to just like look through your body and try to find those and like be sovereign.
Yeah. I think it's important to point out here too that there are ways to have healthy exchange with people without them being in your body, because like you can in fact exchange spiritual powers, you can in fact have energy exchange, you can in fact learn from each other in ways where it increases things that you didn't know were available to you. And without the right framing, that might like feel like someone else being in your body, but someone else being in your body is really like your dad's shitty attitude implying a lens onto your life, is, or like someone within like an energetic tentacle that is like wrapped around your ability to like take action in the world. It's not the same as like, wow, when I'm with this person, our field becomes harmonious together, and I really feel like I've absorbed a sense of grace that wasn't natural to me before.
Yeah,
That's good.
and that's the thing, right? Like the primary thing there is like, is this something that's been that I like? Am I using someone else's consciousness to sort of like experience this? Is this theirs? Like, if I cut them out of my life, will I have this still? And if the answer is no, then that's not a useful thing. The only useful things are the things you can integrate into your own being, without having the other person active and present. And that's the difference between like dependence and interdependence. It's like in interdependence, there's this causal like learning process where you're able to pick up things from other people which are beneficial and resonant for you. And in dependence, you're creating like this sticky connection where you're sort of leveraging their energy to be a particular way.
Yeah, that's super true. It's worth noting too that dependence, like you can tell it when you have that sense that like that grasping sense that I won't have this, so therefore I need to hold on to the way in which things are. Like I could not, and this is also like I see this across everything. I see it across family structures, I see it across grief, right? Like you can recognize and move lovingly with the impermanence of things and still keep people in your hearts and minds as a present being. And it's instead this like grasping thing that actually keeps you out of the present even when you're with them, because there's so much energy bound up in the way things have been, which is sticky and toxic, and directed at keeping it the same way that it is.
Yeah, and you gotta be especially careful when there's a mutuality of it's like mutual dependence, because that's when it can become something you're not aware of, where it's like you and the other person are both doing this like grasping thing where you both kind of feel like you have to be in each other's lives in order to have this particular thing, and like both of you are draining each other's energy in that situation actually. And for any relationship with anything, you want both people to be sovereign.
I've noticed that there's a bit of fear around the idea of sovereignty because we're raised with codependent models looking like the most healthy relationships available. Like I was a therapist. I've been through it. I've looked at like because we live in such a toxic society that when just families that are bad are ones where people are screaming at each other and they hit their kids and like these really extreme circumstances are happening. But the reality is that like most of the ways that we form relationships, or most of the ways that relationships are normalized as being, are actually in this dependent space. And there can be like covert resentment, unclear communication, and all of these are just more ways that energy is like looped and bound into the unconscious, with the shadow needing to be liberated from this vortex, basically, that is seems like the most normal thing, seems like what a healthy relationship looks like. Because oh wow, these people, they're so nice to each other, and they work on their problems when they have them, and they seem like they're complementary to each other as a team. But then like internally, uh one of them couldn't leave for a month, it would be too devastating. Or one of them really like, there's like a behavior in there where they like tug on each other in order to get a specific response. And all of it is much subtler than the level that we're trained to look for and operate at, even as psychologists usually. And what I found is that when you actually come into sovereignty, every relationship you have is better. Like every person you're in contact with, every type of, and when it tries to enter that old energy pattern, there's a lot clearer like, oh, no, that has nothing to do with me and I will not let it happen.
Yeah, and I mean it's I just want to make it clear, like for anyone who isn't any in those kind of relationships, it's like everyone's in those kind of relationships. And it's just important to notice that there are better alternatives, and it's like what is actually a good connection and what is actually a bad connection, and what are you unaware of, right? What's in the shadow and what isn't. Like that's super important to just stay aware of, and just try to make like as many good connections which are making energy as you can with people, and try to remove as many bad connections which are like, you know, when you're talking to your like parents, you don't want to feel like it's like a shitty thing that's losing you energy. And if you can identify the part of you that's connected to the thing that's doing that, the bad connection, the bad part of you which is like joined together, and you can heal that or disconnect that and be more sovereign in your consciousness. Now when you're talking to your parents, it's like a beautiful interaction, and you can do that with everyone on every level, forever, you're in your whole life. Um, and it's like that's kind of like building a resonant life. You know, that's a life's work, and it ain't gonna stop.
Yeah.
But unlike
And it's
Aladdin.
also, yeah. um, that's such a good point to bring up. And also it becomes, what was I going to say? Oh dear. The moment. Mm-mm-mm. No, it might be gone.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, here's what it is. I got it. Um, it is a very compassionate and very masterful magic move to intend to be open for all of your unhealthy connections to change into their healthy connection format. Now, it's also incredibly compassionate to the self to not allow certain types of unhealthy connections to continue to exist in your awareness. But you can do both of these at the same time, because you can say, I'm completely unopen to interacting with this person while this thing that is happening between us is still there, while this connection still is draining my energy. But if they were to come back into my life fully healed and able to have a sovereign connection, I would be open to it.
Yeah, you know, it's like there's different levels of sovereign connection. It's like if there's a way of relating to someone which is creating which is connecting you or parts of you in all these places which are losing energy for both of you, it's like you can just reorient the structure so that you're only connecting on the parts which are gaining energy for both of you. And like I have a lot of
Yeah.
friends, where and they're really, really great friends. And we talk like, once a month, maybe even like once every 6 months. But when we talk, it's this beautiful resonant connection which is just creating so much energy for both of us. And like we both kind of know that if we try to force it into being connected through other ways, it's like it becomes a bit more difficult for both of us to have a good time. And that's actually just supernatural, that like the flow of people in your life is constantly shifting and dilating and changing based on what's going on with them and what's going on with you and what you can connect on, and like what's available to you for a good connection, what's available to you for a bad connection, where just good connection means creating energy and bad connections mean losing energy for both of you.
Which I think is a really concise definition, and I like it quite a lot. What you're talking about here, I've noticed across several people in my life where maybe we are waves that move at different amplitudes. And then it's where both of our waves cross the middle point is that point where we have this amazing thrumming moment. And then I'll see you again when our waves cross each other in a month, in 6 months, in
A
2 years.
week, an hour,
Yeah.
right?
An hour. Yeah. Maybe that's always what it is. And it's just some amplitudes are more happening at the same frequency.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what resonance is, right? You're both at the same frequency for some period of time, and it's like you're both able to be in harmony with that thing. And that's kind of like like really good sex, I would say, as well, is also that thing where you're both resonating at the same sort of like in the same way, like your bodies are kind of resonating with each other, and as well as your mind and your energy and your emotions. And especially with like sexual relationships and romantic relationships, like if you're resonating in the heart with each other, that's creating so much good energy, loving energy. That's and then that becomes like the whole base of the relationship is like this heart resonance that you have with each other, which is like being in love. Yeah. Mm. And it's like a lot of Western spirituality is like it kind of still has the Christian thing of like sex bad. But if you're having a resonant connection, then it's good. It's just like it's that simple. Good connection, good.
Connection bad.
Bad connection, bad. And that's the one you have to pay attention to. The bad connection, bad. Uh, yeah. Mm. So I was thinking maybe we could talk about how it's like using intuitive cues can kind of make your life better, and how that's in operation in our lives. Because for me, it's like the best example, I guess, is a pendulum. It's like so you get a pendulum, and ideally it has some instructions about it. And then if it swings one way, then it's you swing it, and if it swings one way, it means like yes, that means yes. Right now, that way. And if you swing it the other way, and it says a lot that we both have these immediately available. Swings the other way, that means no. And it's kind of like a way to be direct to the energy. It's like what's resonant, what's creating energy, and then not letting the concepts get in the way. And energizeyourlife.org is where you can get a pendulum like this. We're not affiliated. And it's like so you're able to identify what's resonant, even though your rational mind structure isn't able to understand why that's a good thing. And what I found is, when you follow that intuition, it doesn't have to be a pendulum. It can just be a sense that this thing's going to be good. It always is. It always is. And people can get this like muscle things. It's like, oh, like for me, sometimes I find myself just like nodding, and I'm like, oh, I guess this is a good thing. I'll just like, it's just like an intuitive sense. Like my body's telling me that this thing's good, even though I don't understand why.
So the pendulum, what I think is great about it is, especially when people aren't yet in confidence with their intuition and their faculties, the pendulum is it cuts through all of the BS where you're like, oh, am I having an intuitive feeling? Well, let me check. And then also what that builds is your awareness to notice it now, because you've done so many checks with yourself that you're like, oh, that feeling that's happening, I know what that means.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to bring up is that my it can be difficult to realize exactly how subtle the subtle voice is. The subtle voice is the tiny, tiny thing that tells you you should do something. And your rational, scheduled, I live in a house, I want to participate with other people, I'm going to make this meal kind of brain is trying to like bulldoze over that every single time because it has practical concerns that have nothing to do with this little voice that told you you need to go for a walk right now. And then you're like, I can't go for a walk right now. Except like if you went for a walk right now, you would like turn the corner one block up and there would be like a yard sale and they would have something that you didn't even know you needed that is going like has so much magical resonance and is going to change your life by bringing it into your room. But if you ignore that voice, you're not open for that to happen. And like one of the ways to notice that voice is to pay attention when things are going wrong and to look back and see what you ignored.
Very true. Yeah, you're like, nah, I won't worry about that right now. But you know, actually in your heart that you're turning away from an intuitive recognition of something, and you're rationally kind of overriding it. And like one part of like a good spiritual practitioner versus a bad spiritual practitioner, a spiritual practitioner that's successful versus one that is unsuccessful, is being able to tune into what is their intuition telling them, what is, and then that what that actually is what's resonant for them right now, and following that line, even if their understanding isn't matching it, just sort of trusting and having faith. Um, and there's a lot of days that having faith can go wrong, sure, but there's a lot of ways that it can go really right as well. And that process of it going wrong, going right, is also you tuning into how to co-create with that voice. And it's like you might look silly every now and then because like you this intuitive thing that you thought was really resonant ended up not being that resonant, but you're gonna learn and you're gonna become an amazing, beautiful, powerful practitioner who's like doing all these things that they don't really understand that are just like so powerful for them and everyone around them.
One of the things that's worth pointing out is that for our higher selves, our guides, the deities that we work with, everything is like a perfect mandala that they see from the top down. So they're just like, when your intuition is doing this, it's just moving you into the place in the mandala so that like something happens. And like you might not even notice that the reason you went down to that place was so that you could get like an energy packet from that place. Like as you get more sensitive, that will become part of your experience. But that's one of those like, as I got an intuition to go for a hike. Oh, that hike was really relaxing, but you don't necessarily realize that that hike was actually the packet that you need that's going to unlock a spirit power that's going to come online in 3 weeks that you had no idea those two things were related. But from the mandalic perspective, it's right there.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing with energy. It's like doing things that are good for your energy is actually setting up your long term effects, your timelines to be the best possible way that they are. And it's hard to know that like bad energy means like in 5 years, like you have a disease. Is like really how it works. And like good energy means in 5 years you're still super healthy. Um, and I think we're gonna wind down the show now towards the end. Um, I guess, do you have any closing thoughts, Amanda?
Um, this has been a really resonant conversation. I'm
Yeah,
excited to be doing this.
very resonant podcast. I hope it resonated for everyone who's watching now and in the future. And I would say that if you do resonate with me and Amanda, we do offer energy sessions where me and Amanda both work very directly with you and your energy body to put you in better timelines, basically. And that's
That's a beautiful way to put it.
£363 an hour. And you can check out our offering on our Twitter, twitter.com/ChristCulture. You can check out our Instagram, instagram.com/Crystallization Culture. And you can subscribe and like and comment if you want. Not sure what that does, but subscribing is pretty important so you can catch our podcast, which is going to be at the same time, but we don't know if it's going to be weekly or monthly or whatever yet. We're going to figure it out. And we're going to be posting about it, on our Crystallization Culture Twitters and social medias, as well as our personal social medias, for you to know about that. But we're probably going to keep the
Fantastic.
time the same.
Yes.
Okay.
We hope to see everybody there. Also, a reminder about the donation based enlightenment inquiry, the
Yep.
donation based shamanic mentoring.
Yep.
come find out what your potentials are. We'd love to help you.
Yeah, if you're looking for that kind of thing, it's super available. And don't feel like uh these people don't want to talk to me, you know, because that's kind of the voice that comes up a lot. At least it did for me when I was learning. It's like, oh, these people are, you know, they don't like, they're not actually open for that thing to happen. We are open for that thing to happen. Ignore the fear. Abandon it, ideally. Okay, thank you everyone for tuning in. It's been a really great
Thank you
stream.
all.
We're probably gonna end the stream here. Maybe, maybe hang out a little bit on Twitter. If you want to tweet at us or something, message us. Feel free. And yeah, thank you so much for checking out the first episode.
Hey, thank you all. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Hanjo.
everyone. Thank you, Amanda. Bye, everyone.